Good evening. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Welcome to Truth Report. Tonight, we're investigating something that's transforming warfare, repression, and power itself in the 21st century, the surveillance state, and the technology that makes it possible.
We'll take you from the skies above Mali, where satellites are documenting an economic siege, to the streets of Tehran, where Chinese facial recognition cameras are identifying protesters for arrest. From orbit to your face, this is the infrastructure of control.
And we'll ask the question no one wants to answer: who's building the system, who's profiting from it, and what happens when surveillance becomes the most valuable export on Earth?
Let's start with a story that might seem remote: fuel trucks burning in West Africa. But pay attention, because the way this conflict is being tracked tells us everything about how modern warfare is documented, and who gets to see it.
According to an investigation published by Bellingcat in December 2025, more than 130 fuel tankers have been destroyed in Mali since September. Not in combat between armies, but in systematic attacks on civilian infrastructure by Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, an al-Qaeda-affiliated group known as JNAM.
And here's what's remarkable: we know this because of satellites. Bellingcat investigators used NASA's firm's remote sensing fire detection system, Planet Labs satellite imagery, and NASA's Black Marble nighttime light analysis to verify each attack. They geolocated insurgent propaganda videos by matching landmarks to satellite imagery, creating an unimpeachable record of what happened.
6 verified attacks between mid-September and early November. 4 separate routes targeted: convoys coming from Senegal to the northwest, and from Ivory Coast to the southeast. Mali is landlocked. Every drop of fuel has to come by road. And JNIM knows it.
September 14th in the Kays region, over 50 tankers destroyed. October 17th near Sikasso, 50 more. October 21st, another 40 tankers. The pattern is clear. This isn't opportunistic banditry. This is economic warfare, methodically executed.
And the impact on Bamako, Mali's capital? Universities suspended classes. Foreign embassies evacuated non-essential staff. Fuel queues stretched hundreds of meters. Food prices surged. And NASA satellite data detected something chilling: comparing imagery from May 29th and October 25th, there was noticeable dimming of Bamako's city lights.
A city going dark. That's not a metaphor, that's observable from space.
JNIM has shifted its communications strategy, according to the Bellingcat report. They're now predominantly using video on encrypted platforms like Chirpwire. They're documenting their own attacks, creating propaganda that explicitly targets southern Mali audiences and undermines the military regime's legitimacy.
And here's the strategic calculation: NIM's goal isn't just to destroy trucks. It's to demonstrate that the Malian government cannot protect its citizens or provide for them. As analysts at the Africa Center noted, over 70% of Mali is now either controlled or contested by terrorist groups. Nearly 2 million Malians displaced. Farming collapsed. Secular schools shuttered outside urban areas.
The Africa Security Analysis Platform continues monitoring through satellite convoy tracking, insurgent incident mapping, and early warning humanitarian modeling. Open-source intelligence, satellite imagery, fire detection, social media monitoring has become the primary method of documenting a conflict that traditional journalism cannot safely access.
But let's pause here and ask, who else has access to this satellite data? Who else is watching Mali from orbit? Because the technology that allows Bellingcat to document war crimes is the same technology that enables surveillance, targeting, and control.
And that brings us to our second story. On December 31st, 2025, China closed out a record-breaking year in space with the launch of 2 satellites, Shenzhen-29A and Shenzhen-29B. According to reports from Space Daily and the Daily Galaxy, these satellites are explicitly designed for space target detection and advanced surveillance.
China completed 73 space missions in 2025, up from 51 in 2024. And according to data released by the China National Space Administration, 50 of those launches were commercial. That's 54% of the country's total. 25 launches used commercial launch vehicles, and 311 commercial satellites were deployed into orbit, 84% of China's total satellite deployments.
The Hainan Commercial Space Launch Site, China's first dedicated commercial facility, conducted 9 launches alone. Companies like Landspace, Galactic Energy, Space Pioneer, iSpace, and CAS Space are competing to develop reusable rockets for large-scale constellation deployment with high payload capacity, low cost and high launch frequency.
And analysts estimate this industry now encompasses over 600 companies valued between $350 billion and $392 billion. As the International Institute for Strategic Studies reports, China's commercial space sector is shifting from a phase of policy incubation towards one of industrial-scale expansion.
But here's what you need to understand: in China, the line between commercial and military doesn't exist. The U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission's 2025 report is explicit: Beijing's growing satellite networks, which include navigation, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, communications, and missile early warning, are creating a kill web in space that enhances China's military capabilities.
The Shenzhen-29 satellites launched on New Year's Eve. They're part of what the report calls responsive space operations, the ability to rapidly detect, track, and potentially target objects in orbit. Dual-use technology. That means every commercial satellite can serve a military purpose.
And China's development of a Starlink alternative, a mega constellation of internet satellites, creates what defense analysts call resilient command, control, and autonomy for the People's Liberation Army. You think you're getting broadband internet? The military gets an unjammable communications network.
As Small Wars Journal noted in November 2025, China's satellite systems are the backbone of its missile and hypersonic forces. Space-guided supremacy. The ability to strike anywhere on Earth depends on satellites providing targeting data in real time.
So when you hear China's commercial space sector soars with 50 launches, understand what that means. It means an authoritarian state is building an orbital infrastructure of surveillance and control that will persist for decades. And they're doing it faster and cheaper than anyone else.
Now, let's bring this back to Earth. Because satellites aren't the only surveillance technology China is exporting. And the consequences for people living under authoritarian regimes are immediate and brutal.
In January 2026, as protests erupted across Iran, The Diplomat published a stark analysis with a headline that tells you everything. China won't save Iran's regime, but Chinese surveillance technology might.
Here are the facts. According to investigations by Karen and the American Foreign Policy Council, Chinese firms, particularly Tiandi Technologies, have sold surveillance cameras and facial recognition software to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, national police, and military.
Tiandi Center is a subsidiary of Iran-based Audi Nigar Baser Electronic Company and serves as the distributor for Tiandi products across 18 offices in Iran. They supplied surveillance video recorders and thermal imaging cameras directly to the IRGC.
And on December 25, 2025, just days before protests erupted, Iran's ambassador to China visited the People's Public Security University in Beijing, pledging to continue pragmatic cooperation in law enforcement and security. That's not diplomacy. That's a technology transfer program.
As researchers document, China uses police training programs to export its domestic stability maintenance expertise. And those trainings come bundled with business opportunities for Chinese surveillance firms. You learn how to crush dissent, and you buy the cameras that make it possible.
After the Women, Life, Freedom protests in 2022, Iran deployed facial recognition technology from these cameras to identify protesters after the fact. People were rounded up in their homes days or weeks later because an algorithm matched their face to footage from a street camera.
And it happened again in the 2025 to 2026 protests. Facial recognition. Drones firing on crowds and tracking individuals to their homes. And an internet kill switch, finalized with coordination from Huawei and Chinese technical experts, that cut Iran off from the global internet with unprecedented speed and reach.
The United Nations fact-finding mission on Iran released a report in March 2025 stating that the government continues systematic repression and escalates surveillance to crush dissent in the aftermath of protests. Chinese technology is the infrastructure of that repression.
But let's zoom out. Because Iran is not unique. 3 Chinese firms, Hikvision, Dahua Technologies, and UniView, earn an estimated 30% of global video surveillance revenue. According to research cited by CNBC and the Atlantic Council, Chinese tech companies supply AI surveillance technology to 63 countries.
63 countries. Of those, 36 have signed on to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Others include Eritrea, Kenya, Serbia, Sri Lanka, the Philippines, Uzbekistan, and Venezuela. Authoritarian and semi-authoritarian regimes, purchasing the tools to monitor, identify, and control their populations.
In Zimbabwe, China provided a long-term, low-interest loan so the government could buy facial recognition technology. As one analyst told World Finance, China is providing very advanced equipment to countries like Zimbabwe that are known to abuse them.
In July 2019, the U.S. Commerce Department placed Hikvision and Dahua on the Entity List for human rights violations and abuses in the implementation of China's campaign of repression, mass arbitrary detention, and high-technology surveillance against Muslim minorities in Xinjiang. These are the same companies supplying surveillance systems globally.
And here's the economic logic. Civil society groups observe that these AI surveillance applications consolidate the robustness of authoritarian regimes, lead to anticipatory change in people's behavior in favor of the government's positions, and compromise heavily the human dignity of their citizens. That's not a bug. That's the product.
The product is control. The export is repression as a service. And the market is every government that fears its own people.
Now, before we tie this all together, there's one more story, one that might seem trivial compared to war and protest, but actually illustrates something crucial about how surveillance operates in everyday life.
iShowSpeed, a popular American streamer with millions of followers, was touring Africa in late 2025. According to Middle East Eye, on January 10 he attended a football match in Algeria at Nelson Mandela Stadium between MC Alger and USM Alger.
Fans threw water bottles and objects at him from the stands. Speed appeared visibly confused, left the stadium, and ended his stream without explanation. The incident went viral. Many Algerians apologized online. Some debated whether it reflected anti-black racism in North Africa, others attributed it to football hooliganism or fans objecting to being filmed.
And here's what's telling, the article notes that the reason behind the crowd's reaction has yet to be confirmed. There was no official government statement. No reported security intervention. Just a crowd that didn't want to be on camera.
In an era where every moment is potentially recorded, live-streamed, and archived forever, resistance to surveillance can look chaotic, even hostile. But underneath it is a simple human response: I did not consent to this.
Compare that to Iran, where the government is installing cameras specifically to identify you without your consent, to track you, to arrest you later. Or to China's Xinjiang region, where Uyghur Muslims are subjected to biometric surveillance, facial recognition at every checkpoint, and mass detention based on algorithmic risk scores.
The difference is power. In Algeria, a crowd threw bottles. In Iran, the state disappears you. But the technology is the same: cameras, facial recognition, live streaming. What changes is who controls it and what they can do with it.
And that brings us to the synthesis. Let's connect what we've seen tonight.
In Mali, satellites document fuel convoys burning. Open-source investigators use fire detection systems, orbital imagery, and geolocation to verify war crimes and economic warfare. The same technology that enables transparency also enables targeting. Satellites don't have politics, they have customers.
China launched 50 commercial space missions in 2025, deploying 311 satellites. Those satellites provide surveillance, reconnaissance, targeting, and communications. They're dual use by design. The infrastructure of global oversight is being built by an authoritarian state, and it will persist in orbit for decades, beyond the reach of regulation or accountability.
On the ground, Chinese firms have sold facial recognition, surveillance cameras, and internet kill switches to 63 countries. Hikvision and Dahua, sanctioned by the US for human rights abuses in Xinjiang, are still supplying regimes in Iran, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, and beyond. This is repression as a service, and it's a booming export market.
The technology itself is neutral. A satellite image can document a massacre or target a strike. A facial recognition camera can find a missing child or identify a protester for arrest. But neutrality is a lie we tell ourselves to avoid accountability.
Because the systems are being built and sold by entities that are not neutral. The Chinese government is not exporting surveillance technology to advance human rights. Authoritarian regimes are not buying facial recognition to protect civil liberties. The purpose is control, and the infrastructure is already in place.
And here's what should terrify you: this technology gets cheaper, more accurate, and more ubiquitous every year. The satellites stay in orbit. The cameras multiply. The algorithms improve. And once a surveillance network is installed, it is almost impossible to dismantle.
In Mali, people are starving because a jihadist group understands infrastructure. Cut the fuel, cut the lights, cut the legitimacy of the state. In Iran, people are being arrested because an algorithm matched their face to a camera feed. These are both forms of siege warfare: one cuts off resources, the other cuts off freedom.
And the rest of the world is watching this happen in high definition. Bellingcat can track fuel convoys burning. The UN documents surveillance escalation. Activists live-stream protests before the internet is cut. We have more documentation of atrocity and repression than ever before in human history.
But documentation is not intervention. Transparency is not justice. We know what's happening because satellites and open-source tools show us. But knowing doesn't stop it.
So what do we do? First, we name the companies. Hikvision, Dahua, Tiandi, Huawei, ZTE. These are not abstract entities, they are corporations with executives, shareholders, and supply chains. They are making billions selling the tools of repression.
Second, we demand accountability from our own governments. The US sanctioned Hikvision and Dahua in 2019, but the global market for surveillance technology keeps growing. Export controls, import bans, and financial sanctions can limit the spread of these systems, if we have the political will to enforce them.
Third, we support the people resisting these systems. Protesters in Iran are dismantling surveillance cameras. Activists are documenting where cameras are installed and mapping surveillance networks. Digital rights organizations are building tools for encryption, anonymity, and counter-surveillance.
And finally, we have to reckon with the fact that this is not just happening over there. Surveillance infrastructure is being normalized everywhere, in our cities, our schools, our workplaces. The question is not whether the technology exists, but who controls it and what constraints we place on its use.
Because the pattern is clear. Authoritarian regimes buy surveillance technology to entrench their power. Democratic societies sleepwalk into surveillance because it promises security, convenience, efficiency. But the infrastructure is the same. And once it's built, it's almost impossible to tear down.
Tonight, we've shown you satellites documenting convoys burning in Mali, 311 Chinese satellites launched in a single year, and facial recognition cameras in Iran identifying protesters for arrest. This is the world we live in now, where surveillance is the most valuable export, and the infrastructure of control is being built faster than our ability to resist it.
The question is, what are you going to do about it? Because the cameras are watching. The satellites are overhead. And the algorithms are learning.
I'm Maya Clarity.
And I'm Alex Truth. This has been Truth Report. Stay vigilant. Stay informed. And question everything.